She's considerably tighter.
You can't imagine how miserable the lives of slaves were in ancient Rome. Young, attractive women became playthings for the noble's pleasure, though at least they could cling to life. Most other slaves were forced to work in mines day and night until their last drop of blood was squeezed out. However, a few strong slaves managed to change their fate in the arena through life-or-death battles, known for their warrior culture. Romans are crazy about the violent and bloody gladiator matches. The wealthy and powerful are keen on building arenas and recruiting gladiators for bloody battles, which gives rise to the ludus industry, the gladiator training camp. Slave owners pick out the strongest slaves for professional training. Only after passing multiple rounds of selection and tests do they qualify as gladiators. For them, winning deadly fights isn't just the only way to survive, but also a supreme honor. Quintus is one of many ludus owners whose ancestors have trained many famous champion gladiators.
Hadrianus, Acabitus, Zephyros.
He's eager to establish his family's position in the arena, and his ace gladiator Gannicus is his greatest asset. Wielding dual swords and abandoning all defense, Gannicus exudes confidence and wildness. His handsome yet devilish smile makes young girls swoon and men jealous. Even when facing heavily armored fighters, he seems at ease, always managing to toy with his opponents through his agile movements. It's only when Gannicus gets his arm slashed in a sneak attack that he drops his carefree smile. He sticks his swords into the ground and decides to teach this dishonest gladiator a lesson with his fists. Each of his punches is as swift and precise as a cannonball, leaving his opponent dazed. The armored fighter tries to sneak attack Gannicus again, but he won't fall for the same trick twice. After 2 consecutive rolls, Gannicus dodges the slash and retrieves his swords. Seeing that the VIPs haven't arrived at the main stand yet, Quintus quickly reminds Gannicus not to end the match too soon. But swept up in the audience's cheers and shouts, Gannicus instinctively slashes the loser's throat, bringing the atmosphere to a climax. It's then that Capua's magistrate and the noble leader Tullius finally show up. Much to Quintus's disappointment, he had hoped to make a good impression on Tullius during this match to secure a spot in the soon-to-be completed Grand Arena of Capua. Even though he didn't achieve his goal, rewarding the victor is essential. 2 young, beautiful slave girls and a jug of fine wine are enough for Gannicus to enjoy the afternoon. Meanwhile, the other gladiators can only practice fighting under the scorching sun and the threat of whips, while Gannicus engages in a 1-against-2 match indoors. On the street, Quintus runs into Gaia, the well-known Roman socialite and a good friend of his wife Lucretia. In the near future, she'll use her promiscuous body to help Quintus realize his ambitions. This brief encounter gives Quintus a chance to curry favor with Tullius. Learning that the Gallic slave fighting in the street belongs to Tullius, Quintus immediately offers 10 times the price to buy him and get closer to Tullius. Little does he know is that this slave named Crixus is fighting precisely to catch his attention. Only battle-hardened gladiators can notice the intense longing for combat and glory hidden in Crixus's eyes. He's desperate to enter the arena and change his fate. It's not until evening that Gannicus finishes his battle with the slave girls. Melita has been waiting outside for a long time. Her husband Anomaeus is also a legendary gladiator and close friends with Gannicus.
I've sent you which has escaped you. It will be missed.
Anomaeus was once injured in a fight against the famous Shadow of Death. Now that he's recovered and eager to return to the arena, the 2 slave girls who just fought with Gannicus are excitedly describing to 2 other innocent girls how he's hung like a horse. Melita kindly reminds them not to rush into matters of men and women, and not to be too surprised by Gannicus's size.
I've seen bigger.
In fact, her husband Anomaeus is even more impressive in that department. Even late into the night, Quintus still hasn't received a thanks from Tullius. He regrets wasting his money. However, Lucretia's comfort and advice help him regain confidence and form a new plan. In high spirits, he immediately words his wife thoroughly. They're completely unaware of Gaia hiding in the corner, watching with misty eyes, her own desires seemingly aroused. The next day, Quintus pretended to accidentally pass by the butcher shop Tullius frequents. He thanks Tullius for the chance to buy a quality slave. Unfortunately, his rival Vettius is also there. Vettius mocks Quintus for foolishly overpaying for trash. Quintus fires back, claiming his trained gladiator could beat Vettius's best even blindfolded. Feeling humiliated, Quintus challenges Vedius to save face. Instead of stopping their quarrel, Tullius agrees to their match. Oenomaus wants to fight to prove he still got it, but Quintus gives the opportunity to Gannicus. Despite his disappointment, Oenomaus sincerely congratulates his friend, unfazed by the upcoming honor match. Gannicus drinks and sings on a cliff edge. He's long since seen through the essence of slave life. Drink today, face tomorrow's sorrows tomorrow. The match is set in a bustling marketplace, drawing a huge crowd. This plays right into Quintus's hands, allowing him to teach Vedius a lesson while boosting his Ludus's reputation. Sure enough, the popular Gannicus's entrance triggers waves of cheers. Vedius counters by sending out his strongest gladiator Otho, who's long despised Gannicus. Just as Tullius and the magistrate announce the start, Vedius interrupts.
Where is your man's blindfold? That was your boast, was it not?
Quintus is caught off guard. He never thought Vedius would take his trash talk seriously, but Tullius confirms it. Quintus is in a bind. He doesn't want to be labeled a liar, but fighting blindfolded against a top gladiator is suicide. While he hesitates, Gannicus boldly accepts the unfair terms, unwilling to see his master humiliated. Otho also has his pride of gladiator. He bangs his shield to reveal his position before attacking. Gannicus knows blade combat is risky in his condition. To increase his margin for error, he ditches his swords and tackles Otho, then pummels his arm to force him drop his sword. But even in close combat, Gannicus struggles to gain an advantage, getting pinned and pounded by Otho. He then lifts and slams Gannicus hard. The impact nearly knocks Gannicus out, and Otho gives him no chance to recover. As Gannicus takes hit after hit, Quintus's face darkens, while Vedius grins smugly at his successful ploy. However, the tide of battle can turn in an instant. Gannicus, previously on the ropes, seizes an opening in Otho's sword swing, disarming and flooring him. But before he can land many punches, the immensely strong Otho pins him against a wall for a brutal beatdown. Otho then grabs a nail and stabs it deep into Gannicus's shoulder. Even so, Gannicus doesn't give up. Dodging a lethal chop, he feels his way up Otho's arm along the sword and executes a reverse. After repeatedly smashing Otho's head, Gannicus forces his neck onto the sword edge. As Otho's blood sprays like a fountain, Gannicus clinches another spectacular victory. A thoroughly defeated Vedius slinks away, while Quintus gets his wish, Tullius's goodwill, and an invitation to discuss a spot in the new arena. Gannicus basks in the cheers and respect of all the slaves like a returning king, generously sharing his wine reward. Standing in the corner, Sixtus can't hide the envy in his eyes, his desire for glory ignited.
One day.
Quintus returned home in high spirits with the good news, and Lucretia excitedly pours wine, while Gaia brings out opium she brought from Cyprus to enjoy. But Quintus has no mind to celebrate with them. Rushing off to meet Tullius, he doesn't realize he's walking into a carefully laid trap. Tullius never intended to give Quintus a place in the arena. He only covets the strong and popular Gannicus.
I do not offer to broker arrangement, I offer to purchase your man.
It turns out Vedius's ludus is actually Tullius's business. How could he allow Quintus to enter the arena and compete for profits? Faced with Tullius's threats and bribes, Quintus adamantly refuses to sell Gannicus. This thoroughly enrages Tullius, who signals his thugs to ambush and kill Quintus's escort. Then a sack is thrown over Quintus's head. Back home, Lucretia and Gaia, lost in their indulgences, are oblivious to Quintus's plight. As wild as their debauchery is, Quintus's beating is equally brutal. To humiliate him further, Tullius pours hot urine over his head, warning him to reconsider the deal.
Or be excluded from the games forever.
Looking at the nearly completed grand arena of Capua in the distance, the flames of ambition and revenge roar to life in Quintus's heart. By day, Gannicus is the most fierce and powerful gladiator in the arena, but at night, he's forced to entertain noble men.
Impressive.
However, the perverted nobleman doesn't plan to experience it himself, but rather watch Gannicus perform with female slave. Gannicus is forced to couple with his best friend's wife Melita in public, observed by others as if they're watching animals mate. This is the sad, helpless reality of slaves in ancient Rome. Gaia, the alluring Roman socialite, watches the gladiator training from the balcony as usual. The morning air is filled with the clashing of weapons and the strong scent of male hormones. Her gaze is quickly drawn to the new slave Crixus, not for his wild fighting style, but for the impressive outline visible beneath his loincloth.
The Gaul is quite the beast.
Gaia's mind wanders, her blatant flirting making two young naive slave girls blush. Compared to these virile gladiators, their master Quintus seems worn out. Yesterday, he used his ace Gannicus to defeat his competitor, Vedius's strongest gladiator in the street. Little did he know Vedius's backer was the noble leader Tullius. To force the sale of Gannicus, they beat Quintus and humiliated him by urinating on his face. As Quintus vents his rage, a friend arrives with news. Varus, a big shot from Rome, is looking to rent gladiators from Vedius. Gaia has a history with Varus, and aware of his lechery and prurience, sparks a revenge plan in Quintus's mind. He brings out 3 trainee gladiators under the guise of a trial, promising them the gladiator mark if successful. His wife Lucretia and Gaia dress up sexy and flirty, planning to accidentally run into Varus. The unsuspecting Vedius falls for the trap easily, lured into a side alley. When he realizes something's wrong, it's too late. Lying in wait, Ashur and Dangun rush out and quickly dispatch Vedius's servants. Vedius himself gets a savage beating until he passes out. Then Dangun whips it out and pees on his face, returning the humiliation Quintus received. But their job isn't done. To prevent Vedius from retaliating, anyone whose face he sees can't be left alive.
Apologies, brother. Dominus gave instruction.
Meanwhile, Varus, growing impatient waiting for Vedius, is greeted by Gaia and Lucretia instead. Already acquainted with Gaia and charmed by 2 beauties, eager invitation, Varus is soon bewitched and heads to Quintus's mansion. His arrival is about to plunge Gannicus and Oenomaus' wife, Melita, into a whirlpool of shame and pain. Learning that Varus is in Capua to scout excellent gladiators for the wine festival games, Quintus immediately starts boasting about the fierce fighters in his ludus. With Gaia also chimes in with a nudge, fooling Varus's interest instantly. He asks to see a demonstration match. Naturally, the strongest Gannicus is the star, but choosing a worthy opponent puzzles Quintus. Suddenly, Gaia suggests Crixus, clearly impressed by his huge gift she observed in the morning. So Crixus unexpectedly gets this rare chance to shine, making other slaves jealous. But Varus finds wooden swords boring and demands that they should fight with real weapons. Gannicus and Crixus' hearts sink. This means only one of them will survive. Quintus is reluctant, but to please Varus, he has to pretend he doesn't care, and agrees. At the signal, Sicixus launches a fierce offensive. Gannicus skillfully stagger parries with his dual swords, easily deflecting Crixus' assault. Then Crixus rolls to attack Gannicus' lower body. His moves look swift, but lack strategy, easily exposing weaknesses. Just when everyone thinks Crixus is done for, he suddenly stops attacking and waits for Gannicus to strike, trapping his sword under his arm. This unexpected move catches Gannicus off guard. With losing one sword, he can't fend off Crixus' more intense attacks. But Crixus' lack of real combat experience shows. His eagerness to press his advantage lets Gannicus find an opportunity to reclaim his left-hand sword. Naturally, the battle-hardened Gannicus won't give him a second chance. Though Crixus loses, his fighting skills as a newcomer impress everyone. By custom, the chooser decides the loser's fate, and Crixus' heart leaps to his throat.
Let him live.
He may yet find his youth.
The exciting match doesn't seem to satisfy Varus' appetite. Gaia realizes some special services need to offer. Knowing the nobles' peculiar tastes, she instructs Quintus to clean up Gannicus and bring him over. Desperate to seal the deal, Quintus reluctantly complies, ordering Gannicus to fulfill Varus' every desire.
If Varus wishes you to suck his dry, you will savor every drop.
As expected, Varus lavishes praise on every sculpted muscle of Gannicus' body, especially down below.
Are you as skilled in its use as you are with a sword?
Just as Quintus prepares to leave them alone, Varus expresses his preference for watching. Gannicus is just relieved to think his ass is safe, but Varus then assigns Melita to perform with him. Though Melita is Lucretia's personal maid and wife of Gannicus' friend Oenomaus, as slave she has no right to refuse, even if it means betraying her husband. Meanwhile, Oenomaus, oblivious to this and faces his own dilemma. Quintus, honoring his promise to Ashur and Dangun for their help in revenge, forces the gladiator trainer to brand them. Clinging to his principles, the trainer insists untested men don't deserve the mark, a rule set by Quintus' father, but he's just a slave, after all. and can't disobey his master. Disgusted by the desecration of what he considers a sacred rite, the trainer won't even let Asher and Dangon recite the oath. Oenomaus's attempts to calm him only fuel his rage. Oenomaus is forced to take up the sword and duel with his mentor. While inside the house, Gannicus is ordered by Varus to remove Melita's clothes. He looks to Quintus for mercy, but finds none. As the last hope fades, Melita numbly accepts her fate.
See it done?
Gannicus avoids Melita's eyes, his heart as reluctant as Oenomaus is to harm the trainer. But the trainer attacks relentlessly, even wounding Oenomaus' chest despite others' protests. Fighting for his life, Oenomaus battles the frenzied trainer with all his might. Other slaves watch the senseless bloodshed helplessly, while the nobles shamelessly observe Gannicus and Melita's interaction. Their twisted desires are satisfied, but Gannicus and Melita struggle painfully between shame and unwanted pleasure. Oenomaus battles internally too, but he's backed into a corner. The trainer seems to wait for this moment, allowing Oenomaus' sword to pierce him. Having tainted his lifelong beliefs, his heart was already dead. Perhaps dying by his favorite student's sword is his best end.
I taught you well.
Gannicus and Melita are equally disheartened, having committed an irredeemable act. The grieving Oenomaus seeks comfort from his wife, but Quintus denies him, claiming Melita is attending to guests. He'd never guessed that the two dressing figures are his wife and best friend. Satisfied, Varus agrees to have Gannicus represent him in the upcoming gladiator game. An elated Quintus decides to celebrate with Gaia and Lucretia. Melita silently returns to her room and scrubs herself endlessly, but unable to cleanse her spiritual wounds. Guilt-ridden, she can't tell her husband the truth. While Oenomaus blames himself for killing the trainer, as slaves wallow in sorrow and despair, the slave owners revel in debauchery. This time, Guy doesn't have to peek. Lucretia generously invites her to join their wild party. The next day, Quintus publicly appoints Oenomaus as the new gladiator trainer, but Oenomaus finds no joy in it. Accepting the whip means forever abandoning his dreams of the arena. Expectations are high for Gannicus, who is about to play again, but he also looked distracted. His encounters with Melita are now fraught with awkwardness, and he can't meet Oenomaus' eyes. Clearly, their friendship can never return to its former purity. Quintus can't contain his excitement about his ludus potentially producing a champion gladiator, largely thanks to Gaia's social finesse.
You, wild the goddess Laverna herself. Your place in this will not pass without much gratitude.
He decides to reward her lavishly, with Lucretia's eager participation. As the three lose themselves in a whirlwind of desires, an old man barges in. Quintus freezes. He never expected his father, supposedly recuperating in Sicily, to return so suddenly. Quintus goes soft real quick, as Titus is still the head of the household. Unlike the ambitious Quintus, Titus is a very conservative slave owner. Hearing that his son has recently fallen out with Tullius, the noble in charge of the arena, he immediately stops his convalescence and rushes back from Sicily. Titus is furious with Quintus's impatient methods and immediately takes back control of the family ludus. Lucretia is internally terrified. Being caught in such a depraved scene is incredibly shameful. Titus already disapproves of her as a daughter-in-law, and now the situation is bound to worsen. She and Gaia could be thrown out at any moment.
With an old
Titus arrives at the training ground and greets the gladiators like old friends, showing he truly considers them as family. He particularly likes the steady and reliable Oenomaus, but disapproves of Gannicus, whom Quintus has focused on training. In Titus's view, Gannicus' wild and unrestrained personality is not befitting of a champion. He also doesn't think highly of Crixus, whom Quintus bought at a high price. Crixus's training bout with the spear-wielding Barca isn't going well.
My long, hard weapon too much for your little man.
Clearly, the father and son have vastly different ideas about running the ludus, setting the stage for later tragedy. To smooth things over with Tullius, Titus takes Quintus to apologize. Vettius angrily accuses Quintus of having him beaten and stealing his spot in the wine festival games from Varus. But Quintus denies it, saying Gaia happened to run into her old friend Varus on the street and invited him to their home.
Gaia.
The vindictive Tullius immediately takes note of Gaia, which becomes the catalyst for her tragic end. Titus immediately scolds his son and sends him away, knowing that if they make an enemy of Tullius, his gladiators will never enter the Capua arena again. While they're discussing reconciliation, Lucretia faces trouble at home. Varus visits again, this time bringing another noble Cassius. It turns out he's heard about the special services Varus enjoyed there and has come to experience them himself. Lucretia tries to politely refuse, but Varus threatens to end his cooperation with Quintus. To avoid Melita being harmed again, Lucretia suggests using an untouched slave girl for the performance. The love-struck Nevia and Diona show a glimmer of joy. Cassius deliberately chooses a filthy gladiator, then turns his malicious gaze toward the two slave girls. Their beauty and figures satisfy him, but he wants to inspect them more deeply.
I shall have this one. She's considerably tight.
Diona, who was chosen, barely has time to feel happy before falling into a whirlpool of pain and shame. Cassius orders her to perform with the dirty gladiator and directs their actions. When he gets excited, Cassius even joins in, subjecting Diona to double the pain. Soon, Cassius leaves the room satisfied, praising Lucretia's services. However, Diona remains in shock, the gap between her ideals and reality dealing her a heavy blow. Yet her sacrifice is destined to be in vain, as Titus has already reached an agreement with Tullius. He returns Quintus's spot in the wine festival games to Vettius, and in return, Tullius arranges 2 additional gladiatorial matches for him. Although Quintus is furious and unwilling, he doesn't dare defy his father's will. Meanwhile, there's unrest in the Ludus. The couple Barca and Octus, about to get intimate, discover several of their pigeons are missing. Since Asher and Dangine received their gladiator marks without going through trials, they're despised by others, and someone deliberately mixed urine into their lunch.
Once again finds its way to them now. As it stuck for the
To retaliate, Asher eats Barca and Octus's pigeons, and they soon end up in a brawl. Asher calls for Crixus's help, but Trixus believes he's not qualified to join their fight as he hasn't earned his mark yet, which impresses Gannicus. At this moment, Titus returns to the Ludus and is infuriated by the chaotic scene before him. He uses this opportunity to announce that they've lost their chance to participate in the wine festival games. Gannicus is thunderstruck. The pain he and Melita endured that night now seems like a cruel joke. In the 2 gladiatorial matches arranged by Tullius, he makes an exception by designating Strixus, who doesn't have a mark. Crixus is a low-quality slave Quintus bought from Tullius, who clearly wants to humiliate Quintus's judgment. But for Crixus, this is a dream opportunity, as he's been eager to show his skills in the arena. Unfortunately, Strixus is matched against Octus, who, like Barca, is a spear-wielding gladiator. Even though Crixus can now hold his own against Gannicus, he always loses to Barca.
You were better matched against wooden men.
His training time has been too short, and he lacks experience against long weapons. Seeing this, Oenomaus arranges for Gannicus to teach Crixus techniques for fighting spear-wielding gladiators, and Gannicus even gives him a practical demonstration. Early the next day, the 4 chosen warriors don their battle robes and say their final goodbyes to their brothers, knowing only 2 of them will return alive. Titus has no faith in Crixus, believing Octus, trained in his traditional way, is superior. Quintus disagrees but can't argue. The first match pits the spear-wielding Barca against the sword and shield fighter Gnaeus. In the first round, Barca is careless and gets cut on the abdomen, worrying the watching Octus. However, Barca quickly regains his composure. His spear and small round shield form a perfect offense and defense, leaving Gnaeus no openings. Even in close combat, Gnaeus can't gain any advantage. Finally, Barca seizes an opportunity and kicks Gnaeus into the audience stands. After taking a hard punch to the face, Gnaeus loses all fighting ability and becomes like a lamb waiting for slaughter. Fortunately, Varus spares Gnaeus to thank Quintus for his special hospitality, but Quintus doesn't feel relieved. Barca is exceptional, and Octus, who's about to fight Crixus, is even better. Crixus is equally nervous. This is both his debut and a fight that will determine his fate. Both he and Quintus have reasons why they absolutely can't lose.
Do you wish to behold such miracle come to pass?
That is all I desire.
Then seize fucking glory and see us both proven worthy.
Stepping onto the blood-soaked sand of the arena for the first time, Crixus is strangely fascinated by the deafening cheers and the strong smell of blood. Octus appears more composed, his toned figure winning waves of admiration. This match is also a sword and shield fighter against a spear wielder, and Octus starts with a low sweeping move that fully demonstrates the spear's advantage. Crixus barely avoids the first attack, but doesn't expect Octus to have a short sword hidden under his round shield. Caught off guard, Crixus loses his footing and soon gets cut on the chest. However, Crixus doesn't give up and manages to slash Octus's right leg. Octus wields spear to rival Mars himself, forces Crixus to retreat repeatedly, impressing the nobles in the VIP stands. Some spectators are so engrossed they fall into the arena. While Quintus's face darkens with growing despair, Octus leaps into the air, attempting to end the match with a powerful thrust. Seeing the spear tip so close, anger wells up in Crixus. The frustration of being repeatedly suppressed by spears during training reaches its boiling point. While Octus can't pull out his spear, Crixus suddenly exerts force and breaks it. Crixus's bestial nature is fully unleashed, and Octus, having lost his spear, can't withstand his fury. His fierce slashes are even quicker and heavier than when he fought Gannicus, but Octus clearly doesn't have Gannicus's extraordinary swordsmanship. In the end, Crixus's sword pierces through both Octus's body and fighting spirit. This unexpected outcome instantly electrifies everyone. What the arena has always lacked is not warriors but miracle makers. At this moment, Crixus is certain he was born for gladiatorial combat. Octus's blood paves Crixus's path to becoming a legend, but it also leaves Barca heartbroken. Crixus finally earns his mark and gains the respect of other gladiators. Even Barca, despite losing his lover, offers congratulations with a complex expression. Lucretia finds herself increasingly drawn to Crixus, foreshadowing their future illicit relationship. Quintus also gains recognition. Titus is surprised by his son's keen eye. As a slave bought on a whim has defeated a gladiator, he focused on training. But before Quintus can rejoice, he's hit with another setback. Crixus' victory reignites Titus's passion for gladiatorial games, and he decides to stay and continue running the Ludus. His presence is undoubtedly an obstacle to Quintus' pursuit of fame and fortune. To realize his burgeoning ambitions, Quintus will resort to any means necessary, even if it means crossing ethical and moral boundaries. Slaves had no dignity or freedom whatsoever in ancient Rome. At night, they were tools to satisfy the desires and fetishes of the nobility, with even male slaves not spared. By day, they became killing machines in the arena, entertaining the crowd by spilling blood and sacrificing their lives. Whether with swords, spears, or even nets and tridents, they would use any means necessary to defeat their opponents. Such violent and savage combat made the audience blood boil with excitement, even risking having their fingers sliced off as they leaned in to watch. As the heavily armored swordsman gets trapped in a net, his life enters its final countdown. The victor earns cheers and glory, even rewards of fine wine and beautiful slave girls from their master. The defeated are dragged away like trash, a bloody and cruel scene that shocks newcomers Asher and Dongon in their first appearance. Survival means becoming a true gladiator. Death proves they're worthless.
That's what the mighty Asher.
But big talk only suppresses fear. Only strength matters in the arena. Different types of gladiators require different strategies. For instance, Dangan closes in on the spear wielder, making it hard for them to use their weapon effectively. With precise and ruthless swordplay, he quickly cuts off his opponent's arm, ending the fight. However, Ashur isn't as tough as he boasts. He's driven back repeatedly and even loses his helmet, just as he's about to be split in two by an axe. Dagon steps in to save him. To save face, Ashur picks up the axe and goes berserk on the corpse. He shamelessly takes all the credit for the victory, disgusting even his master Quintus. As a result, Ashur only receives half the reward Dongan gets, filling him with jealousy and directly leading to Dangan's misfortune of Ass later. In reality, the fiercest battles in the arena aren't between gladiators, but the power game played by slave owners. To secure his position in the arena, the ambitious Quintus isn't above offering special performances to bribe the noble Varus, but he doesn't realize this has made him famous in noble circles. While walking down the street, Quintus's wife Lucretia runs into Petronius, a big shot from Rome. The socialite Gaia eagerly greets him, but Petronius remains cold until he hears Lucretia's name.
I have heard your house spoken of, and the pleasures contained within.
Clearly, Varus must have gone around bragging about the special services he enjoyed at Quintus's house. Hearing that Petronius and his friends want to experience it too, Quintus is tempted again. If he can gain Petronius's support, he might have a chance to secure a place in the soon-to-be completed Capua Grand Arena. But his father Titus is a very conservative slave owner who would never agree to such an absurd thing. so Quintus instructs Lucretia and Gaia to arrange the hospitality party, while he sends his father away on the pretext of buying slaves at the port. Learning she'll have to provide another humiliating performance, Diona feels dead inside. She even starts to resent why it wasn't her good friend Navia who was chosen by that perverted noble. As guests arrive, the depraved party officially begins. The nobles savor fine food and wine while enjoying Diona and a male slave's vigorous performance on a high platform.
The man as a bull, calls to purpose.
But this is just an appetizer. To please these powerful figures, Lucretia has prepared a feast for the senses. Just as she's about to announce the after-dinner activities, an uninvited guest shows up. Lucretia doesn't welcome Tullius's arrival. He recently beat up Quintus trying to forcibly buy his star gladiator Gannicus. But Tullius's status is too high to offend, so she has to let him wander around with ill intent. To let the nobles enjoy themselves without inhibition, Lucretia has carefully prepared masks of the gods, hinting they can shed human moral constraints. But Tullius inappropriately disrupts again, suggesting a sword match with Gannicus to entertain everyone. Lucretia can't find a reason to refuse. Aeneas understands the gravity of the situation and warns Gannicus not to hurt Tullius or win. Gannicus can only keep dodging and yielding, as a slave injuring a noble would certainly mean death. But Tullius pushes his luck, recklessly inflicting several cuts on Gannicus. Finally, Gannicus humiliatingly raises 2 fingers in surrender. Seeing Gannicus refuse to take the bait, Tullius is furious but can't find another excuse to kill him for now. Melita tenderly treats Gannicus's wounds, but he can no longer hide his love. Since that night when Varus forced them to be intimate, Gannicus has developed real feelings. Although he knows he shouldn't love his best friend Enemeus' wife, he's already lost in that twisted pleasure. Melita also hasn't escaped that night's forbidden emotional whirlpool. But reason ultimately triumphs over impulse. She can't betray her husband. Meanwhile, the masked nobles have completely become beasts of desire, with some even eyeing the gladiators. Since Dangan doesn't speak their language, Ashur translates for them. Remembering how Dangan has stolen his spotlight and earned the master's favor, Ashur conceives a vengeful scheme.
He's agreeable. He tells me he hopes you're not of a gentle nature. Brutes such as this craves for offense. And they're equal.
Then he shall be well satisfied. Come.
Thus, Dagon is unwittingly led away by a noble, facing a spear more terrifying than those in the arena. To prevent Tullius from causing more trouble, Guy personally goes to entertain him. She's always wanted to associate with the powerful, so she doesn't resist Tullius's wandering hands. Tullius naturally won't turn down such a delicious meal served to him, especially since Gaia is a renowned beauty in Rome. As everyone's energy is thoroughly drained, this crazy party comes to an end. Petronius satisfied praises Lucretia's hospitality and agrees to Quintus's demands regarding the new arena. But before Lucretia can rejoice, tragedy strikes. Not seeing Gaia leave with Quintus, she goes to look for her. The red wig on the floor immediately gives her a bad feeling. Evidently, Tullius still harbored resentment towards Gaia for helping Quintus snatch away what he believed was rightfully his. In a fit of insanity, he had smashed Gaia's skull. To make matters worse, having failed to find suitable slaves, Titus returns home early. He furiously accuses Lucretia of tarnishing the family's reputation and forces Quintus to throw her out. After a final kiss goodbye to Gaia, only one thing leaves in her mind is revenge. Undoubtedly, the biggest victim of this farce was Diona, whose body and mind suffered immense damage. Unable to bear seeing her growing depression, Naevia secretly gives her saved money to help her escape. However, the outside world offers no refuge for a slave. Diona's fate seems destined for tragedy. Dangan also endures severe torment, his is still aching. He vows to make Ashur pay dearly for his betrayal. Titus completely loses trust in his son. He overturns all of Quintus's business ideas and strategies, determined to reorganize the entire ludus. All gladiators must participate in a 2-day ranking competition, with those ranking low to be sold directly to the mines. Stripped of all authority, Quintus feels full of resentment but dares not defy his father before truly inheriting the ludus. Reality proves that Ashur's combat ability is far inferior to his scheming and intriguing. He can't even beat Neas, who has just transitioned to being a net fighter. After losing 3 matches in a row, he unfortunately faces Dangan. If he loses again, the mines will become his final destination. Dangan clearly won't soften at his pleas. He won't miss this rare chance for revenge. Fooled by anger and pain, Dagon's attacks are particularly fierce. Knowing he's outmatched, Ashur sincerely begs to end his own life. However, as soon as Dangan lets his guard down, Ashur ambushes him, unexpectedly striking his forehead hard. Such despicable behavior disgusts everyone, but in the arena only victory matters, not morality. Cunning is also part of one's strength. The undisputed best performer in the entire competition is the acknowledged ace Gannicus. Additionally, the newcomer Scrixus's record is also impressive. Since overcoming his fear of spears by defeating Octus, his skills improved dramatically. His terrifying explosive power and agility combined with increasingly refined combat techniques leave him with few rivals, winning battle after battle. However, Gannicus often seems distracted due to his emotional entanglement with Melita, even affecting his performance. Titus, who already doesn't think highly of him, becomes increasingly dissatisfied. Coincidentally, Tullius arrives with a jug of fine wine to reconcile with Titus and apologize for last night's events. But his real intention is to buy Gannicus. He desperately wants this trump card.
The only thing I have ever sought.
In return, Titus will have the right to sit in the VIP seats of the new arena, sharing honor and profits, something Quintus has always dreamed of. Titus wavers internally and seeks advice from his most trusted Oenomaus. Oenomaus doesn't want his good brother to be sold and firmly believes he can become champion. So Titus decides to make a decision after tomorrow's final. Oenomaus immediately informs Gannicus that he must give his all to win tomorrow, or he will no longer belong here. But Gannicus hardly listens, his mind full of Oenomaus' wife Melita. He again confesses his love to Melita, but they both know this relationship can't end well. In the next day's final, Gannicus still can't shake off his distraction. Even facing Six's storm of slashes, he can't help but glance at Melita during breaks in the fight. In a moment of distraction, his forehead is struck by the wooden sword, turning his long accumulated depression into anger, which he pours out on Sixus. However, every time he meets Melita's gaze, he remembers that unforgettable and intoxicating intimacy. The despair and helplessness of unrequited love make his heart sink. At that moment, he no longer craves victory. Perhaps leaving is the right choice. Gannicus raises 2 fingers in surrender for the second time in his gladiator career, this time losing to his own emotional turmoil. His sale to Tullius seems inevitable, and Lucretia faces a similar predicament. Titus gives Quintus an ultimatum: either divorce Lucretia or get out with her. Lucretia understands that Titus's biggest dissatisfaction with her is her inability to bear children as heirs to the family. Despite years of trying with Quintus, her womb remains unresponsive. Looking at the rugged muscular Crixus, exuding hormones, Lucretia's mind conceives a crazy and bold idea.
Move it.
The noblewoman secretly finds a strong male slave to help her conceive. Such a crazy act is actually for revenge. With the help of her friend Gaia, Lucretia hosts a special party to bribe nobles from Rome. However, her husband's arch-enemy and the arena manager Tullius shows up uninvited. To prevent him from causing trouble, Guy personally entertains him, but he smashes Gaia's head after enjoying their intimacy. Heartbroken Lucretia vows to make Tullius pay dearly. However, when her father-in-law Titus learns about the depraved party she hosted at home, he insists on driving her out. Without family support, she has no way to fight against the powerful Tullius, and her husband Quintus is stripped of family power. Now the only way to stay is to conceive an heir, but she and Quintus have been trying for years without success, so she sets her sights on the strong slave gladiator Crixus. Learning that Srixus's father and grandfather both had 5 sons, Lucretia doesn't hesitate to bend over.
Into me.
And do not cease until you have spilled seed.
However, fate plays a trick. Just as she finishes discussing procreation techniques with Crixus, Titus suddenly falls ill and becomes bedridden. Quintus immediately follows the doctor to buy needed medicines, while Lucretia shows an intriguing expression. After others leave, she brings the wine sent by Tullius and feeds it to Titus. Meanwhile, Melita takes advantage of her husband's absence to visit Gannicus with wine. He deliberately lost the final fight with Scrixus, hoping Titus would sell him to Tullius to end his forbidden love for Melita. Since they were forced to perform that special show publicly, Melita has also developed feelings for Gannicus. She decides to respond to his passionate love once before Gannicus leaves. However, just as they're about to get intimate, accident occurs. Obviously, there's a problem with the wine, and Gannicus, who didn't drink due to his troubled mood, narrowly escapes. At the same time, Titus also coughs up blood and dies on the spot.
You curse this house.
Lucretia finally reveals her fangs. It turns out Titus's prolonged illness was due to Lucretia putting slow-acting poison in his wine every day, attempting to force him back to Sicily to recover. But Titus was so stubborn that he refused to leave even as his condition worsened. What Lucretia didn't anticipate was that the poisoned wine not only killed Titus, but also the innocent Melita. Seeing his wife's tragic death, Oenomaus is devastated, while Quintus doesn't have a strong reaction upon seeing his father's corpse. He instantly understands that Lucretia is the murderer, as Tullius has no reason to kill Titus, with whom he has no conflict of interest. But Quintus tacitly approving his wife's actions, without his father's restraint, he can finally act freely to realize his ambitions. The unknowing Gannicus and Oenomaus believe it was Tullius's poisoned wine killed Melita, and they vow to avenge their loved one. At the funeral, Vettius claims to represent Tullius in paying respects, but he's actually there to coerce Quintus into fulfilling Titus's promise to sell Gannicus. Quintus becomes furious and decides to settle old scores with Tullius for beating and urinating on him. To smoothly implement his revenge plan, Quintus enlists the help of his friend Solonius. Solonius is a typical fence-sitter. He was the one who leaked to Tullius about Lucretia's secret special party at home. He has also long coveted Lucretia, and was quite happy to persuade Quintus to compromise when he learned that Quintus was being forced to divorce Lucretia. Sure enough, he immediately tells Tullius about Quintus's plan, learning that Quintus not only plans to harm him, but also intends to sell Gannicus to far-off Syria. Tullius becomes enraged and forces Solonius to reveal the transaction location. Just as Quintus brings Gannicus to a secluded alley to trade with the Syrians, Tullius bursts in aggressively, but he quickly realizes he's been tricked. Quintus has ambushed him with many men surrounding them.
Come, let us embrace. Cunt.
As Tullius came in a hurry without many followers, they're no match for a group of skilled gladiators, and the battle is one-sided with no suspense. Filling with rage, Gannicus and Oenomaus prepare to kill Tullius to avenge Melita, but Quintus stops them.
Such a death would be far too quick.
According to plan, Solonius takes Vettius away to force him to hand over all of Tullius's properties. Tullius panics completely when he's brought to the newly built Capua Grand Arena. He begs for mercy repeatedly and promises Quintus a place in the arena. Quintus directly stuffs his father's ashes into Tullius's mouth, making him taste the fear of death. Thinking of the bullying and humiliation he suffered before, Quintus can't contain his anger. Oenomaus and Gannicus, unable to restrain their hatred, pounce on Tullius and stab him repeatedly. With barely a breath left, Tullius watches himself being walled into the arena.
This arena was your life. Add to its foundations.
He dies without realizing he was framed and schemed against by a woman. Thus, Lucretia uses the family to complete her revenge for Gaia. She secretly summons Crixus again, but this time not for pregnancy. Gaia had always wanted to experience the strong Crixus, so Lucretia puts on Gaia's red wig, preparing to fulfill this wish for her. Quintus finally clears all obstacles, vowing to lead the family to fame in tomorrow's gladiatorial games. The one-eyed Danjong looks at Ashur with a cold smile. His chance for revenge has come. The next day, the newly built Capua Grand Arena officially opens, with tens of thousands of spectators gathering to watch the grand opening battle. As the magistrate wonders why Tullius hasn't shown up, Vettius rushes in claiming Tullius has gone to deal with urgent matters elsewhere. Everyone is surprised, except for Quintus and Solonius. To cover up Tullius's death, Solonius has forced Vettius to cooperate in lying. Without Tullius' protection, Vettius dares not resist. Just as Quintus prepares to buy Tullius's gladiators according to the set script, Vettius suddenly states that all gladiators have been transferred to Solonius. Quintus' face changes immediately, as he had previously agreed with Solonius to split them equally. Obviously, Solonius has betrayed him, reaching an agreement with Vettius in advance to monopolize all the benefits. Now, Solonius has become the owner of the most gladiators, while Quintus finds himself at an absolute disadvantage. As entertainment before the game starts, 4 criminals are brought to the arena for execution. Casudius immediately recognizes Diona among them, still savoring her performance from that day. It seems Diona didn't successfully escape, and Nevia looks at Quintus with pleading eyes, but he vetoes pardoning Diona.
Let her death stand as a warning to all others who would seek to betray me.
This is the fate of female slaves. Their dignity, freedom, and lives are ruthlessly trampled by slave owners. The fate of male slaves is also about to face judgment. The first to take the field is Crixus. Lucretia trimmed his unruly long hair and beard the night before. With less savagery and more heroic spirit, he increasingly shows the potential of a champion gladiator. Each fight is exceptionally fierce as they vie for glory, with hot blood raining down and soaking the thirsty sand. It proves that Quintus's gladiators are superior. Under the tutelage of the legendary Hyenomaeus, their strength has skyrocketed, with Gannicus even winning by defeating 2 enemies at once. Solonius's face gradually darkens. Even with more wins than losses, Quintus's situation remains grim, as Solonius has twice as many gladiators. As night falls, the ultimate battle begins. Quintus is just one step away from realizing his ambition.
Only one man will claim victory this day. And by the gods, that man will be from the f***ing house of Spartacus!
Quintus has only 7 gladiators left to fight, while Solonius still has 13. Dozens of horns sound simultaneously, their majestic roar seemingly shaking the spectators' souls. The pungent smell of lamp oil mixed with lingering blood scent permeates the arena as flames rise, constantly stimulating the gladiators' taut nerves. They will fight to the death within a ring of fire to compete for the supreme glory of God of the arena.
Begin!
At the magistrate's command, Gannicus charges forward and topples the opponent coming towards him. But he's immediately knocked down by Solonius's ace Caburus with a shield. A comrade trying to block Caburus is killed with one stroke. Already at a numerical disadvantage and losing a man early, Quintus' situation looks dire. Gannicus, no longer careless, begins to fight cautiously, achieving kills with minimal effort. Assur, though mediocre in strength, cleverly chooses weaker opponents. In contrast, the stronger Dangane finds himself in a tough battle. Crixus fights like a god of war, single-handedly fights 3 gladiators without falling behind. His outstanding performance quickly attracts Caburus' enmity, who kicks him several meters away. But even Caburus can't change the entire situation alone. Hyenomaeus' targeted training of the gladiators now pays off. The net fighter Gnaeus dips his net in burning kerosene and threw it at his opponent, instantly scorching him. Gannicus also gradually gets into his rhythm, his dual swords mercilessly reaping lives. Seeing the tide turn in his favor, Quintus mocks Solonius' gladiators for having quantity but no quality. But his smugness is short-lived, as Dangane, seeking revenge for his punctured ass and right eye, turns to attack Assur. Solonius immediately retorts that Quintus' gladiators disregard family honor and kill each other. Assur, as treacherous as ever, kicks sand into Dangan's face as he's knocked down by a sneak attack. Blinded in his remaining eye, Dagan is left defenseless and is run through by Asher's sword. By now, the battle has reached its climax, with not only the gladiators fighting fiercely, but even excited couples in the audience engaged in their own intense battles. Caburus is strong as an ox and unstoppable, charging and knocking Gnaeus out of the ring. Crixus avoids his onslaught, methodically defeating and killing other enemy gladiators. Soon, only Assur, Crixus, and Gannicus, who entangled with Caburus, remain. The cunning Assur proposes joining forces to eliminate the strongest Gannicus before competing for the championship. But Crixus disdains allying with such a despicable person. There's only one opponent in his eyes.
Gannicus is mine!
But before dueling Gannicus, he must deal with the major problem of Caburus. Facing Caburus, who's as tough and thick as a monster, even their combined efforts can't break his defense. As Gannicus is kicked away, Crixus struggles to withstand the 1,000-pound chops. In a critical moment, Gannicus picks up a shield and pushes Crixus aside, blocking a fatal blow for him, but this leads to his own elimination. The original 3-to-1 advantage suddenly becomes a 1-on-1 match, surprising everyone. Gannicus's attacks, though precise, still can inflict decisive damage on Caburus, while Caburus's powerful blows are all lethal. Dodging too late, Gannicus is thrown into the air, and even though he barely survives by using a corpse as a shield, he's left at the end of his rope. Just when everyone thinks the outcome is decided, Gannicus remembers Crixus' skill of static breaking when trapped in a desperate situation during their fight. When an opponent launches a killing blow, it's also when they're most likely to expose a weakness. By concentrating and seizing that fleeting opportunity, one might turn defeat into victory. Everyone's jaws drop in disbelief. Even Caburus doesn't realize how he died. With powerful strength and indomitable will, Gannicus creates miracles again and again. He is the undisputed god of the arena. Quintus is elated. His family has produced another champion gladiator. Nobles praise him and offer olive branches of cooperation. Solonius, unwilling to see Quintus' success, suggests granting Gannicus freedom to showcase the magistrate's generosity and mercy. No noble would refuse such a prestige-enhancing act, and Quintus dares not spoil the mood and reluctantly agreeing.
Gannicus has proven himself to the city of Capua. Let him be rewarded with freedom.
Gannicus becomes the first gladiator to shed his slave status in the arena. He gifts his champion's prize to Crixus, hoping he will continue the legend. From then on, countless Roman gladiators will follow in his footsteps, fighting bloodily for a chance to change their fate. After bidding farewell to his brothers in arms of many years, he sets off on a path of freedom he never dared to dream of. Even having lost an ace, Quintus remains confident in leading his family to rise again. Little does he know that 2 years later, he will fall by the sword of the legendary gladiator Spartacus.